Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Arkansas. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. The town of Jasper, nestled in the rugged Ozark Mountains of Newton County, Arkansas, exists today as a quiet community where travelers stop for gas and locals exchange pleasantries on Main Street. But in 1920, this isolated pocket of America harbored a mystery that would leave an indelible mark on the region's collective memory. What happened at the Coons property 6 miles northwest of town, along what is now County Road 74, represents one of the most perplexing cases in Arkansas criminal history. On the morning of October 17, 1920, a Sunday, the bell at the First Methodist Church of Jasper rang as usual. The congregation filed in, exchanging nods and greetings. But one face was conspicuously absent, that of Ezra Coones, a 47-year-old farmer and handyman who, despite his reputation as a loner, had never before missed a Sunday service in 20 years. According to church records preserved in the Newton County Historical Society, Reverend Thomas Whitfield made a notation in the margin of his sermon notes, "E.C. absent, unusual," by midweek when Ezra still hadn't been seen in town to collect his mail or purchase supplies at Wilson's General Store, as was his Wednesday custom. Sheriff Milton Pruitt rode out to the Coons homestead. What he found there would become the subject of official inquiry, rumors, and speculation that persisted well into the 1960s, when the last living witness died, taking certain secrets to the grave. The Coons property, approximately 85 acres, of mostly wooded land, with about 20 cleared for farming, had been in the family since 1891. The main house, a 2-story structure built of local oak and pine, stood on a small rise overlooking Buffalo River to the south. Behind the house, a dilapidated barn leaned at a precarious angle. A root cellar, dug into the hillside east of the house, was secured with a padlock that, according to Sheriff Pruitt's initial report, appeared unusually new compared to the weathered state of the property. What made the Ezra Coones case so peculiar wasn't just his disappearance, but what was discovered in the house, the contradictory accounts from the few who knew him, and the inexplicable phenomena reported by those who later inhabited or investigated the property. According to Newton County Courthouse records, the case was officially closed in 1923 with the designation "whereabouts unknown," presumed deceased. However, documents uncovered during a courthouse renovation in 1968 suggest a more complex narrative, one that authorities of the time may have been ill-equipped or unwilling to fully investigate. In the dusty attic of the Newton County Courthouse, a box of files marked simply Coons 1920 contained photographs, interview transcripts, and personal effects that tell a different story than the official record. These documents, along with diaries, letters, and oral histories collected from Jasper residents between 1945 and 1962 by local historian Martha Burrows, form the basis of this account. What follows is not merely the story of a man who vanished, but a journey into the darkest corners of isolation, delusion, and the terrible weight of secrets kept too long. The Coons family had never been numerous or particularly social. County records show that Ezra's father, Jeremiah Coons, arrived in Newton County in 1891 with his wife, Sarah, and their only son, Ezra, then 18. They purchased the land from a banker in Harrison who had acquired it in a foreclosure. According to local rumor, documented in Burroughs interviews, the previous owners had abandoned the property suddenly, leaving behind furniture, clothing, and even food on the table. Jeremiah was described in contemporary accounts as stern but fair, a man of few words who attended church regularly but participated minimally in community affairs. Sarah, according to those who remembered her, was even more reserved, rarely venturing into town and speaking only when directly addressed. An entry in Dr. Wilfred Hoskins' medical journal from 1897 notes, Mrs. C. displays melancholia and nervous disposition. Presciar, laudanum tincture, 15 drops as needed for sleep. Sarah died in 1899 of what was recorded as wasting illness, though Dr. Hoskins privately suspected tuberculosis. After Sarah's death, Jeremiah and Ezra continued on the property, farming, enough to sustain themselves and selling surplus at the local market. Jeremiah was found dead in 1907, apparently from heart failure while working in the fields. This left Ezra, then 34, alone on the property. According to tax records, he maintained ownership and continued farming, though on a reduced scale. He supplemented his income by offering his services as a handyman in Jasper, developing a reputation as a skilled woodworker and reliable, if somewhat odd, laborer. He could fix just about anything, recalled Thomas Wilson, proprietor of Wilson's General Store, in a 1945 interview with Burroughs. Quiet fellow, kept to himself, but did good work. Always paid his debts promptly, always in cash. Never saw him smile, not once in all those years. What few people knew was that Ezra had received formal education beyond what was common for rural Arkansas at that time. School records from Harrison show he attended through the 10th grade with exceptional marks in mathematics and natural sciences. A notation from his former teacher, discovered in Burroughs' research, described young Ezra as uncommonly bright but socially withdrawn, with peculiar interests in geology and astronomy, not covered by our curriculum. The isolation of the Coons property likely exacerbated Ezra's natural tendencies toward solitude. The nearest neighbor, the Hargrove family, lived nearly 2 miles away. Eliza Hargrove, interviewed in 1946, recalled that her father occasionally employed Ezra for carpentry work, but found him unsettling to be around for long periods. She described an incident in 1917 when Ezra arrived at their farm before dawn, claiming he had walked all night after seeing strange lights in the woods near his property. Father gave him coffee and sent him home, she recalled. Said it was just foxfire or lightning bugs, but Ezra insisted it was something else entirely, something that moved with purpose. Ezra's regular habits made his disappearance all the more noticeable. Every Wednesday, he would arrive in town shortly after noon, collect his mail, purchase supplies at Wilson's, and occasionally stop at the barber shop. He attended church every Sunday, sitting in the same pew near the back, and left immediately after the service without participating in the customary social gathering. He never married, and as far as anyone knew, had no close friends or confidants. The last confirmed sighting of Ezra Coones was on Wednesday, October 13th, 1920, when he made his usual trip to town. Wilson's ledger shows purchases of coffee, flour, salt, kerosene, and 3 boxes of .30-30 rifle ammunition, this last item being somewhat unusual, as Ezra typically purchased ammunition only before hunting season in November. The postal log shows he collected 2 pieces of mail, the Arkansas Farmer Homesteader Monthly Newsletter and a letter from St. Louis, Missouri, sender unknown. Clarence Jenkins, who worked at the post office in 1920, told Burroughs that Ezra seemed agitated when collecting his mail that day. Usually he'd just nod and pocket the letters, Jenkins said. That day, he tore open the St. Louis letter right there at the counter, read it twice. His hand was shaking. When I asked if everything was all right, he looked at me like he'd forgotten I was there, said something like, "It's confirmed then," and walked out without another word. At Wilson's store, Ezra's behavior similarly deviated from his norm. Grace, Wilson, Thomas's wife, noted that he spent nearly 20 minutes examining a county map on the wall, something he had never shown interest in before. She overheard him muttering about northern boundaries and convergence points. When she inquired if he needed directions somewhere, he abruptly returned to his shopping. The barber, Samuel Ritter, provided perhaps the most disturbing account of Ezra's final appearance in town. According to Ritter's statement to Sheriff Pruitt, Ezra declined his usual haircut, but asked instead for a mirror to examine the back of his own neck. Never seen a man so concerned about the back of his neck. Ritter recalled he kept twisting around trying to see it from different angles, asked me if I could see anything unusual there. I told him there was nothing but a birthmark he'd always had. He seemed relieved but said, if it changes, if it starts to look different, you tell the sheriff right away. Strangest request I ever had in 30 years of barbering. When Sheriff Pruitt arrived at the Coons property on Thursday, October 21st, the scene appeared oddly undisturbed. The front door was unlocked, not uncommon in rural Arkansas at that time, and inside nothing initially seemed amiss. A coffee cup sat on the kitchen table, half full and gone cold. A chair was pulled out as if Ezra had just stepped away momentarily. His rifle, a Winchester Model 1894, was missing from its usual place above the fireplace, but his coat still hung by the door. The most peculiar aspect, noted in Pruitt's report, was the state of Ezra's bedroom. The bed was made, but on top lay clothing arranged in the shape of a person, complete with boots at one end and a hat at the other. According to Pruitt, it looked as if someone had laid out clothes to resemble a sleeping man. Next to this arrangement was a small wooden box containing several folded papers, which Pruitt took into evidence. A search of the property revealed no immediate signs of foul play. Ezra's mule was in its stall, properly fed and watered. The chickens appeared tended. The root cellar, when unlocked, contained the expected stores of preserved vegetables, cured meats, and supplies, along with something unexpected. In the far corner, partially hidden behind shelves of mason jars, Pruitt discovered a small door, approximately 3 feet high. It appears to be an entrance to a secondary chamber, Pruitt wrote in his report. Upon opening, found a space approximately 8x10, containing a table, chair, and numerous papers affixed to the walls. The nature of these papers and their significance is unclear at this time. Photographs taken by Pruitt's deputy, Vernon Ellis, show walls covered with newspaper clippings, hand-drawn maps, and what appear to be personal letters. A kerosene lamp sat on the table alongside a leather-bound journal. This journal, along with selected papers from the walls, was collected as evidence and described in detail in a supplement to Pruitt's report dated October 23, 1920. The hidden room's existence raised immediate questions. According to county records, the root cellar had been built by the property's previous owners, not the Coons family. Had Ezra discovered the hidden chamber upon moving to the property, or had he created it himself? The construction seemed older than Ezra's tenure, with supporting beams showing considerable age. More puzzling was why such a room would have been built in the first place. Too small for practical storage, too inconvenient for regular use, yet finished with surprising care, including a wooden floor when the main cellar had only packed earth. The journal, covering the period from January 1919 to October 12, 1920, documents a gradual but clear deterioration in Ezra's mental state. Early entries are mundane, recording weather conditions, farm tasks, and occasional interactions in town. By mid-1920, however, the entries become increasingly paranoid and disjointed. An entry from February 12, 1920 reads, "Check the north. Field boundary again today. The stones have moved, I'm certain of it. Measured the distance to the large oak, now 127 paces, was 142 last fall. No natural explanation. By May, Ezra had begun reporting unusual sounds. Tapping in the walls again, last night. Not mice or insects, too rhythmic, almost like code, lasted from midnight until just before dawn. Sleep impossible." In June, his concerns escalated. They're watching the house again. Came back from the north field and saw fresh tracks by the, not animal, too deliberate. They're getting bolder. By September, Ezra's entries suggest he was sleeping in the hidden room. Safer here. They can't get through these walls as easily. The old symbols Father carved seem to slow them down. Must remember to lock the outer cellar door. The final entry, dated October 12th, the day before Ezra's last trip to town, contains just 4 words. It's in the walls. The newspaper clippings found in the hidden room primarily concerned disappearances and unusual deaths across Arkansas and neighboring states. Some dated back to 1899, the year of Sarah Coons' death. Many were marked with Ezra's annotations, including one about a missing family in Washington County from 1915, beside which he had written, same pattern, always in October. One clipping from the Arkansas Gazette, dated October 26, 1899, reported the disappearance of a trapper named Elias Whitby from an area approximately 40 miles north of the Coons property. The article mentioned that Whitby had been acting peculiarly in the weeks before his disappearance, claiming to have discovered something unusual in a cave system. Beside this article, Ezra had written, "Mother knew him, said he visited Father's once." What did they discuss? Another clipping from 1907, the year of Jeremiah's death, described an unusual geological phenomenon, a perfectly circular depression that had appeared overnight in a field near Fayetteville. Geological experts attributed it to karst activity, but Ezra had underlined certain phrases and written in the margin, "Same as Father found, not natural." Among the papers collected from the walls was correspondence between Ezra and someone identified only as R.M. of St. Louis. The letters, spanning from 1918 to 1920, discuss what they refer to as the phenomenon and contain references to similar occurrences in other locations. The final letter from R.M., postmarked October 10, 1920, and likely one of the pieces of mail Ezra collected on his last trip to town, warns, "Do not attempt further investigation alone. Will arrive by month's end. Tell no one." The identity of Furious R.M. remained a mystery to investigators at the time. Inquiries sent to the return address in St. Louis came back marked, "No such person at this address." The building listed, according to city records obtained by Burroughs in 1952, had housed the offices of the Midwestern Society for Geological Research, a small private organization that dissolved in 1921, shortly after Ezra's disappearance. The most disturbing item found in the hidden room, according to Deputy Ellis's personal notes obtained by Burroughs, was a small leather pouch containing what appeared to be human teeth. Laboratory analysis conducted at the state capitol determined they belonged to at least 3 different individuals. No record of this evidence appears in the official case file, and when Burroughs questioned Ellis about it in 1950, he claimed no memory of such an item, despite his detailed description in his contemporaneous notes. Sheriff Pruitt, faced with an unusual situation but no clear evidence of crime, initially classified the case as a missing person investigation. A search party organized on October 24th combed the surrounding woods and checked the banks of Buffalo River, but found no trace of Ezra or his rifle. With no body and no clear indication of foul play, the investigation stalled. One search party member, Luther Holcomb, reported finding strange markings carved into trees in the northern section of the property. In his statement, he described them as kind of like letters, but not English or any language I know. Sheriff Pruitt dismissed this finding, suggesting they were likely old trail markers or property boundary signs. However, when Holcomb led a deputy back to the location the following day, he was unable to locate the marked trees again, claiming the area looked different somehow. What happened next contributed significantly to the enduring mystery of the case. On November 2, 1920, a fire broke out at the Coons property, destroying the main house entirely. By the time neighbors noticed the blaze and arrived, the structure had already collapsed. The cause was officially recorded as undetermined, though speculation ranged from an unattended kerosene lamp to deliberate arson. James Hargrove, who participated in the failed attempt to extinguish the fire, later told his daughter Eliza that the flames behaved unlike any fire I've ever seen. According to her recollection of her father's account, the fire burned with an unusual color, not orange or red, but almost blue-white, especially at the center, and it made a sound, not crackling like normal fire, but a low humming that made your teeth ache. Curiously, the root cellar and its hidden room survived the fire. When examined afterward, however, all papers had been removed from the walls, and the journal was missing, despite having been logged into evidence at the sheriff's office. When questioned about this discrepancy years later, former Deputy Ellis claimed the journal and papers had been sent to the state capitol for analysis and never returned. Ellis's account was contradicted by state records, which show no receipt of such evidence. More troubling was Ellis's resignation from the sheriff's office in December 1920, followed by his abrupt departure from Newton County. He resurfaced in Oklahoma in 1923, working as a night watchman at an oil field. When located by Burroughs in 1950, he was living in a small apartment in Tulsa, reportedly suffering from what his landlady described as terrible nightmares and a nervous condition that makes him afraid of the dark. In December 1920, with Ezra still missing and presumed dead, the county initiated probate proceedings. As Ezra had no known heirs, the property would normally have escheated to the state. However, on December 18th, a man named Robert Marshfield arrived from St. Louis, presenting documentation claiming to be Ezra's second cousin and rightful heir. The documentation, reviewed by Judge William Hargrove, was deemed sufficient, and Marshfield took possession of the property. The documentation, examined decades later by Burroughs, appeared authentically aged, but contained several inconsistencies. The family Bible, cited as proof of relation, showed different paper and ink characteristics on the page, listing Marshfield's connection to the Coons family. More significantly, church records from Ezra's birthplace in Tennessee, obtained by Burroughs in 1958, showed no mention of the branch of the family from which Marshfield claimed descent. Marshfield's arrival caused a stir in Jasper. He was described by multiple witnesses as tall, well-dressed, and speaking with what some called an Eastern accent. He hired local men to clear the burned house and begin construction of a new, smaller cabin near the original foundation. He also spent considerable time examining the root cellar and hidden room, according to workers on the property. He had us dig all around that cellar, recalled James Pruitt, no relation to the sheriff, in a 1947 interview. Paid good money but wouldn't say what he was looking for. Had us dig 6 feet down in some spots. Never found anything that I saw, but he seemed mighty interested in the soil itself, kept taking samples in little glass jars. Marshfield's stay in Jasper was brief. By February 1921, he had sold the property to a cattle rancher from Harrison and departed. Property records indicate he sold the land for considerably less than its assessed value. His whereabouts after he leaving Jasper are unknown, though Martha Burroughs' research uncovered a death certificate for a Robert Marshfield in Philadelphia, dated October 17, 1925, exactly 5 years after Ezra's disappearance was first noted. The death certificate listed cause of death as acute respiratory failure following severe trauma. The coroner's notes, which Burroughs obtained through persistent correspondence with Philadelphia authorities, described injuries inconsistent with accident or common assault, including unusual markings on the posterior neck and upper spine. The coroner further noted that the body exhibited advanced decay inconsistent with time of death, making detailed examination difficult. The cattle rancher who purchased the property, Henry Gladwell, never lived on the land, using it only for grazing. The small cabin Marshfield had built remained mostly unused until 1927, when Gladwell hired a caretaker, Vincent Holloway, to live on site and manage the operation. Holloway's tenure at the property adds another layer to the mystery. In letters to his sister in Little Rock, preserved in the Arkansas State Archives, he initially described the place as peaceful enough, if a bit lonely. By 1928, however, his correspondence took a darker turn. "There's something not right about this place," he wrote in August 1928. "The cattle won't graze in the north field no matter how green it gets. They just stand at the fence line and bellow, and the sounds at night, like something moving in the walls of the cabin. Mr. Gladwell thinks it's raccoons, but I've trapped for them and found nothing." In September 1928, Holloway reported discovering the remains of the original root cellar and its hidden room. Explored the old cellar Mr. Gladwell mentioned. "Most of it's collapsed now, but there's a section still intact, a small room behind the main space. Found some strange carvings on the support beams. Not just initials or dates, but complex designs, almost like writing, but not any alphabet I recognize, similar to what I've seen carved on some of the older trees up north." In October 1928, Holloway reported finding odd markings carved into trees at the property's northern boundary. He described them as not letters exactly, nor pictures, but deliberate all the same. He enclosed a rough sketch in his letter showing symbols that bear some resemblance to cattle brands, but match no known marking used in the region. A linguistics professor at the University of Arkansas, consulted by Burroughs in 1960, examined the sketch and noted similarities to certain Native American pictographs, but could not identify a specific tribal origin. More intriguingly, he pointed out resemblances to symbols found at archaeological sites in southern Missouri, estimated to predate known tribal settlements by several centuries. Holloway's final letter, dated October 15, 1928, mentions plans to explore a depression in the ground he had discovered about a quarter-mile north of the cabin. "Looks like a sinkhole starting, but perfect circle, about 6 feet across. Ground. Feels strange there. Hollow somehow. Going to check it tomorrow." The letter included a crude map showing the location of the depression relative to landmarks on the property. He also mentioned his intention to bring a camera, recently purchased from a catalog, to document what he found. "If there's a cave system down there, could explain some of the sounds I've been hearing. Sound carries strange ways underground." On October 18th, when Holloway failed to pick up supplies left for him and Jasper, Gladwell sent 2 ranch hands to check on him. They found the cabin empty, with no sign of disturbance. Holloway's few possessions remained, including his coat and boots. The men reported that they called for him and searched the immediate area, but as daylight was fading and a storm approaching, did not venture to the northern section of the property. One detail from their report, overlooked at the time, but noted by Burroughs, was the presence of a strange smell in the cabin, which one of the men described as like lightning just struck nearby, that sharp, burning smell. The same man reported seeing marks on the floor like something wet had been dragged across it, leading from the bedroom to the front door. A more thorough search conducted on October 20th by Sheriff Leland Pruitt, son of Milton Pruitt, who had retired in 1926, covered the entire property, including the depression mentioned in Holloway's letter. According to the official report, they found a circular area approximately 6 sigs in diameter where the soil had subsided about 18. No evidence of tunneling or other explanation for the subsidence was apparent. There was no sign of Holloway or any indication of what might have happened to him. The search party did discover Holloway's camera hanging from a tree branch about 50 yards from the depression. The film, when developed, showed 6 exposures, 5 of the circular depression from different angles, and a final image that the developing technician described as too overexposed to make out clearly. This last photograph was not included in the case file and is presumed lost. This second disappearance from the same property, almost exactly 8 years after Ezra's vanishing, reignited interest in the original case. Sheriff Leland Pruitt reviewed his father's files and attempted to locate the evidence collected in 1920, particularly Ezra's journal and the papers from the hidden room. However, county records indicated that these items had been destroyed in a small fire at the courthouse in 1924, a fire that damaged only the evidence storage area and was later determined to be arson, though no one was ever charged. After Holloway's disappearance, Gladwell sold the cattle operation and the property remained vacant until 1935, when it was purchased by the newly formed Ozark National Forest as part of a Depression-era land acquisition program. The cabin was used occasionally by forest rangers but was not permanently occupied. In 1942, during a resource survey, Forest Service employee Raymond Carter spent 3 nights in the cabin. His field notes, filed in the Forest Service archives in Harrison, contain a curious entry for April 17th. 2:15 a.m. I woke to sound of scratching in walls. Too rhythmic for rodents, almost like Morse code, but no pattern I recognize. Lasted approx 45 minutes, then stopped abruptly. Will request maintenance check structure for infestation. Carter's notes for the following day describe his exploration of the property, including his discovery of unusual circular depressions in the northern section. He counted 7 such depressions, ranging from 2 to 8 feet in diameter, all perfectly circular, and arranged in what he described as a pattern suggesting deliberate placement rather than natural formation. He included a sketch showing the depressions forming a rough semicircle opening to the north. A maintenance report filed the following week notes: examined cabin walls for evidence of pests, found no access points or nests. Structure sound. Note: observed unusual cold spot in any corner of main room. Possible draft source unidentified. Recommend further examination when budget permits. This report was filed by maintenance supervisor Edward Gaines, who later told Burroughs that he had actually found something unusual during his inspection, but was instructed by his superior not to include it in the official report. According to Gaines, he discovered a small cavity behind the wall in the northeast corner, containing what appeared to be a cloth bundle. When he attempted to remove it, he experienced a sensation like an electrical shock that left his arm numb for several days. He reported this to the district ranger, who personally removed the bundle and told Gaines to forget about it. No further examinations were documented, and the cabin was used only sporadically through the 1940s and early 1950s. In 1953, as part of a facilities modernization program, the Forest Service demolished the cabin, which had fallen into disrepair. The root cellar, however, was preserved and reinforced for potential emergency use. It was during this renovation that workers made a discovery not documented in official Forest Service records, but recounted by Oscar Jenkins, one of the laborers, in a 1962 interview with Martha Burroughs. When we were shoring up the walls of that old cellar, we found something wedged behind one of the support beams. Looked like it had been deliberately hidden there. A tin box, rusty but intact. Inside was a bundle of papers wrapped in oilcloth, still readable. According to Jenkins, the papers appeared to be pages torn from a journal, the handwriting matching. Samples Burroughs showed him from documents known to be Ezra's. The pages contained what Jenkins described as ravings about something living in the woods, something that could change its shape. Said it had taken his mother, then his father, and was coming for him next. Said it needed the blood of his bloodline to stay in this world. Jenkins claimed that the site foreman, upon seeing the contents of the box, instructed the workers to forget about it and took possession of the items. When Burroughs attempted to corroborate this account with the foreman, Charles Danning, he denied any knowledge of such a discovery. Forest Service records show that Danning left his position suddenly in November 1953, less than a month after the renovation project, and relocated to Oregon. Burroughs, determined to track down Danning, eventually located him in a small coastal town in Oregon in 1961. Her notes from their brief telephone conversation indicate that Danning was initially hostile, refusing to discuss his time in Arkansas. When Burroughs mentioned the Coons property specifically, Danning reportedly became agitated, asking, "How did you find me? Did they send you?" before abruptly ending the call. Attempts to arrange a face-to-face interview were unsuccessful, and Danning moved again shortly after the call, leaving no forwarding address. In 1955, a geological survey of Newton County conducted by the University of Arkansas identified the area containing the former Coons property as having unusual subterranean features consistent with extensive cave formation. The report noted that the limestone composition of the region would typically result in more gradual and irregular karst development, making the perfectly circular surface expressions observed in the northern section worthy of further study. This recommendation led to a more detailed examination in 1958 by a team led by Dr. Harold Winters, a geologist specializing in karst topography. Winters' team conducted soil analyses, ground-penetrating radar surveys, then a relatively new technology, and limited excavations around several of the depressions. Their findings, published in a 1959 paper in the Journal of Speleological Studies, described a network of chambers and passages at approximately 50-75 feet below surface level, exhibiting characteristics inconsistent with typical limestone dissolution processes. More controversially, Winters suggested that certain features indicated possible anthropogenic modification of natural cave structures dating to an indeterminate pre-Columbian period. This assertion was met with skepticism from many of Winters' colleagues who attributed the unusual formations to natural processes not yet fully understood. However, the paper did attract attention from several archaeologists interested in pre-Columbian cave use in the Ozark region. One such archaeologist, Dr. Eliza Montgomery, obtained permission to conduct a preliminary survey of the site in 1962. Her field notes, archived at the University of Arkansas, describe finding artifact fragments of unclear origin near one of the larger depressions, including pottery shards with decorative elements not consistent with known indigenous styles of the region. She recommended a full archaeological excavation, but funding constraints prevented this from occurring. Montgomery's career took her elsewhere, but she maintained an interest in the site. In a 1967 letter to Burroughs, she wrote, "I remain convinced that something significant lies beneath that property, something that predates any recorded human habitation in the region. The patterns we observed suggest purpose, design, not random geological processes, but intentionality." The final chapter in the documented history of the Ezra Coones case came in 1965, when a geology student from the University of Arkansas, Martin Reynolds, was conducting a survey of karst formations in Newton County. Reynolds's field journal, archived at the University Library, records his investigation of a significant sinkhole formation on what had been the northern section of the Coons property. Sinkhole, approximately 20 feet in diameter, conical depression leading to a vertical shaft. Depth of shaft measured at 47 feet to a ledge, with a secondary drop beyond that point. Shaft walls show unusual smoothness, not typical of natural karst processes. Plan to return with proper equipment for full descent. Reynolds did return on October 17, 1965, 45 years to the day after Ezra Coones was first noticed missing. He was accompanied by a fellow student, Peter Garrison, who later provided an account of what transpired. According to Garrison, they established a rope system, and Reynolds descended into the shaft. Radio contact was maintained, with Reynolds describing a chamber roughly 30 feet in diameter at the bottom of the secondary drop, approximately 75 feet below the surface. He reported unusual formations on the walls that he initially thought were mineral deposits, but upon closer examination determined to be carvings or inscriptions of some kind. Reynolds described the chamber as unnaturally cold despite the moderate autumn temperature above ground. He also noted a strange acoustic quality, saying that his voice seemed to produce echoes that lasted longer than would be expected in a space of that size. Most intriguing was his description of what appeared to be a perfectly circular opening in the floor of the chamber, like a well shaft, but horizontal instead of vertical, leading deeper into the earth. The last transmission from Reynolds, as recounted by Garrison, was, "There's something else down here. Looks like, oh God, I think it's..." At that point, the radio emitted a burst of static, followed by what Garrison described as a sound like no human voice I've ever heard. When Reynolds failed to respond to subsequent calls, Garrison attempted to pull him up using their rope system. The rope came up severed, the end appearing, in Garrison's words, melted or dissolved rather than cut. Garrison immediately sought help, and a rescue operation was mounted, reaching the site just before nightfall. By the time rescue workers were prepared to descend, however, a new development made entry impossible. The shaft, which had been open and stable during Reynolds' descent, had collapsed entirely. Subsequent excavation attempts were abandoned after multiple equipment failures, and what the incident report describes as hazardous gas emissions from the collapsed opening. The official explanation attributed the collapse to natural geological instability. However, engineers consulted by Burroughs noted that such a sudden and complete collapse would be highly unusual for a shaft that had shown no signs of instability during Reynolds's descent just hours earlier. The University of Arkansas placed a memorial plaque for Reynolds near the site in 1966. Forest Service records indicate the area was designated off-limits for safety reasons, and in 1968, the sinkhole and surrounding 5 acres were fenced off. Martha Burroughs' final interview regarding the Coons case was with Garrison in 1967. He had by then completed his geology degree but abandoned plans for graduate studies. He was working as a high school science teacher in Fort Smith and initially refused to discuss the incident. When finally persuaded, he added one detail not included in the official report. Before the static, before that inhuman sound, Martin said something else. He said, "The walls are moving." Those were his exact words. "The walls are moving," just like what they found written in Ezra's journal. After what happened, I looked into the history of that place. Too many coincidences, too many disappearances, always in October, always without a trace. Garrison's account included other details he had previously withheld. According to him, Reynolds had experienced unusual symptoms in the days leading up to their expedition. He complained about headaches, said he felt like something was pressing against the back of his skull, and he mentioned dreams, always the same dream, about standing in a circular room with symbols on the walls that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Most disturbing was Garrison's claim that Reynolds had received an anonymous letter at his university office just days before their trip. The envelope had no return address, just his name. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a crude drawing of a circular depression with a human figure standing beside it for scale. Below the drawing, just 3 words, "Not in October." Martin thought it was a prank from another student. Now, I'm not so sure. Garrison also revealed that he had returned to the site alone in the spring of 1966, against Forest Service regulations. I had to know if anything remained, any evidence of what happened to Martin. The collapse had created a shallow basin, maybe 3 feet deep at the center. The soil in that basin was different, darker, almost black, with an oily sheen when it rained. Nothing grows there, not even weeds. I took a sample, had a friend in the chemistry department analyze it. He couldn't identify some of the compounds, said the molecular structure was unusual. When asked if he believed there was a connection between Reynolds' fate and the earlier disappearances of Ezra Coones and Vincent Holloway, Garrison's response was unequivocal. "I'm certain of it. Whatever's under that ground has been taking people for a long time, and I think it's getting stronger, more active. The incidents are getting closer together. First Ezra, then 8 years later Holloway, then 37 years to Reynolds. But there have been others, I'm sure of it, people who went missing in those woods that were never connected to the pattern. Burroughs died in 1969, her collection of interviews and research passing to the Newton County Historical Society, where they remained largely forgotten until a renewed interest in local history in the early 2000s led to their rediscovery and cataloging. A curious footnote to Burroughs's research emerged in 1971, 2 years after her death. A survey team mapping the newly established Buffalo National River discovered a series of stone cairns in a remote area approximately 1 mile north of the former Coons property. The cairns, numbering 12 in total, were arranged in a perfect circle 50 feet in diameter. At the center stood a larger pile of stones with a flat slab on top, into which had been carved symbols similar to those described in accounts of the markings found by Holloway in 1928. Park Service archaeologist Dr. William Martinez, who examined the site, estimated that while the cairns had been deliberately constructed, their age was difficult to determine due to weathering and the lack of associated artifacts. In his report, he noted that the symbols bear no clear relationship to known indigenous petroglyph styles of the Ozark region, but suggested they might represent an idiosyncratic expression of folk magic practices documented among isolated communities in the area during the 19th century. Martinez recommended further investigation, but before this could be arranged, heavy flooding in the spring of 1973 altered the landscape significantly. When researchers returned to document the cairns more thoroughly, they found the site submerged beneath several feet of silt and debris deposited by the floodwaters. Subsequent attempts to relocate the exact position using survey coordinates were unsuccessful, leading to speculation that the entire formation had been washed away. In 1978, a Park Service ranger named Michael Thornton reported finding a single standing stone approximately half a mile from the presumed location of the cairn circle. The stone, about 3 feet tall and 18 inches wide, had markings similar to those documented by Martinez. Thornton photographed the stone but did not record its exact location. When he returned with the archaeological team 2 weeks later, the stone could not be found despite an extensive search. The following year, Thornton requested transfer to another park. In a personal letter to a colleague obtained by researchers in 2005, he explained his decision. "After what I've seen and heard in those woods, I can't stay. The dream started after I found that stone. All was the same. I'm standing in a circle of stones, and something is rising from the ground at the center, something that has no fixed shape, but seems to be made of darkness itself. When I wake, my bed sheets are soaked with sweat, and I can still hear the whispering that filled the dream, words in no language I recognize, but that somehow I almost understand. Today, the former Coons property lies within the boundaries of the Buffalo National River, established in 1972. The site of the house and root cellar has been reclaimed by forest, with no visible remnants of human habitation. The area where the sinkhole was located remains restricted, marked on Forest Service maps simply as hazardous terrain, no entry. In 1982, a group of hikers who had ventured into the restricted area against regulations reported seeing a perfect circle of dead vegetation approximately 30 feet in diameter. According to their account, filed with the Park Service but treated with skepticism, the ground within the circle appeared charred as if by intense heat, despite no evidence of a conventional fire. Park rangers who investigated found no such formation, though they noted that one of the hikers required medical attention for what was described as acute anxiety and disorientation after the incident. In 1994, an unauthorized archaeological expedition led by Dr. Samuel Crawford, a controversial figure known for his interest in fringe theories about pre-Columbian cultures in North America, attempted to conduct ground-penetrating radar surveys of the northern section of the former Coons property, Crawford and his team of 3 graduate students were apprehended by Park Service personnel before completing their work, but not before gathering some preliminary data. Crawford's academic reputation had already been tarnished by his promotion of unorthodox theories, and his findings from the abbreviated survey were largely dismissed by mainstream archaeologists. However, his raw data, published in a small journal of alternative archaeology, showed what appeared to be a series of perfectly circular chambers connected by straight passages, approximately 60 feet below the surface. Professional geologists who reviewed the data suggested it likely represented natural cave formations whose regular appearance in the radar images was an artifact of the equipment's limitations. Crawford maintained until his death in 2001 that the formations were artificial, created by an unknown civilization predating all recognized North American cultures. In his final published paper, he connected the Coons property to a network of what he termed power sites across the Ozarks, linking them to the disappearances of Ezra Coones, Vincent Holloway, and Martin Reynolds, as well as numerous missing persons cases spanning more than a century. While Crawford's theories found little acceptance in academic circles, they did attract attention from paranormal researchers and conspiracy theorists. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, several unauthorized expeditions attempted to access the restricted area, leading the Park Service to increase patrols and install more robust fencing. In 2005, as part of a routine resource management survey, Park Service biologist Dr. Laura Chen noted an unusual pattern of vegetation in the vicinity of the former Coons property. In her report, she described finding concentric rings of plant growth, with species composition shifting dramatically between rings. At the center of these rings, spanning approximately 100 feet in diameter, she observed stunted growth and unusual morphology in otherwise common species. Soil samples from this area revealed abnormal mineral content and pH levels inconsistent with the surrounding forest. Chen suggested that these anomalies might be related to underground hydrological features affecting nutrient distribution, a natural explanation that nonetheless hinted at something unusual beneath the surface. Chen also reported that electronic equipment, including GPS devices and digital cameras, frequently malfunctioned within this area. While she attributed this to possible electromagnetic interference from mineral deposits, she noted that the pattern of malfunctions was itself unusual, with equipment failing only when pointed or directed toward the center of the concentric vegetation rings. In 2008, a series of minor earthquakes, unusual for the region, was recorded in Newton County. Seismologists from the University of Arkansas detected a cluster of small tremors, none exceeding 2.5 on the Richter scale, with epicenters within a mile of the former Coons property. Dr. James Harden, who analyzed the data, noted that the pattern of seismic activity was consistent with subsidence events rather than tectonic movement, suggesting the possibility of cave collapses or similars. Underground structural failures. Follow-up surveys conducted in 2009 indicated that the tremors had altered the subterranean landscape significantly. Comparison with earlier geological data showed what appeared to be substantial changes in the configuration of presumed cave systems, with some passages collapsing while others seemed to have expanded. Most notably, the circular chambers identified in Crawford's controversial 1994 survey no longer appeared in the new data, as if they had either collapsed entirely or somehow been filled in. What happened to Ezra Coones and to Vincent Holloway, Martin Reynolds, and possibly others remains unknown. The official records provide a framework of dates and basic facts, but the truth lies somewhere in the gaps between those facts, in the missing evidence, the contradictory accounts, and the strange discoveries made over decades. In 2010, during digitization of old county records, a court clerk in Jasper discovered a sealed envelope tucked inside the cover of a property deed book from the 1920s. The envelope, yellowed with age, contained a single sheet of paper with what appeared to be a handwritten note from Sheriff Milton Pruitt, dated November 5, 1920, just days after the fire at the Coons property. The note, apparently never filed officially, read, "Found something at the Coons place that I can't explain. Didn't want to put it in the report. After the fire, when we were checking for hot spots, Thompson and I dug through the ashes where Ezra's bedroom had been. Under the floorboards, we found a metal box that survived the heat. Inside was what looked like a journal, older than Ezra's, probably his father's from the dates. Most pages too damaged to read, but one had a drawing, a circle with smaller circles. Inside it, like a target. Next to it, written in what looked like blood. It comes through the circles when October thins the veil. Thompson wanted to keep investigating, but I told him to leave it be. Some things shouldn't be disturbed. I'm putting this note here in case something happens to me. If you're reading this, be warned. Stay away from the North Field." The authenticity of this document remains disputed, with some suggesting it may be a modern forgery planted as a hoax. However, handwriting experts who examined it concluded that it was consistent with other known samples of Pruitt's writing, and the paper and ink dated to the appropriate period. The discovery prompted renewed interest in the Coons case among local historians. In 2012, the Newton County Historical Society organized a panel discussion featuring experts in archaeology, geology, and folklore to examine the various theories surrounding the disappearances associated with the property. While no consensus was reached, the event highlighted the enduring mystery and its significance to local history. Perhaps the most intriguing development in recent years came in 2015, when Dr. Eliza Montgomery, the archaeologist who had briefly investigated the site in 1962, broke decades of silence on the subject. Now in her 80s and retired from academic life, Montgomery gave an interview to a regional historical journal in which she revealed that her interest in the Coones property had been sparked by a discovery made during her preliminary survey that she had never included in her official report. "We found a chamber," she said, "not a natural cave, but something constructed. The entrance had been deliberately sealed with fitted stones, some weighing hundreds of pounds. We documented it, but didn't open it. That would have required resources. We didn't have and permissions we couldn't get. I submitted photographs and coordinates separately to my department head, but they were never acknowledged. When I inquired later, I was told my materials had been misplaced. I always wondered if someone else went back there, someone with more authority than a junior archaeologist on her first field assignment. When asked why she had waited more than 50 years to share this information, Montgomery replied, "Fear at first. I was told in no uncertain terms that discussing unauthorized findings would end my career. Later, after I was established, it was easier to focus on other sites, other projects, but I've never forgotten what we found or the symbols carved into those ceiling stones, the same symbols that keep appearing in every account of the Coons property from Ezra's time to the present." Montgomery's claim could not be verified, as she had no surviving documentation of the alleged chamber, and the site itself had undergone significant changes in the decades since her survey. She died in 2017, taking any additional details to her grave. Some in Jasper still speak of the Coons case in hushed tones. They tell of strange sounds in the woods north of town, of livestock that refuse to graze in certain areas, of hikers who report momentary disorientation when passing near the old property line. They speak of October as a time when the veil between worlds thins, when what lurks in the deep woods might more easily cross over. Local guide Jake Thornton, who leads authorized hiking tours in the Buffalo National River area, acknowledges that some visitors ask about the Coons legend. "I tell them the facts. that there were disappearances, that the area has some unusual geological features, that parts of the old property are restricted for safety reasons. I don't embellish, but I don't dismiss it either. Something happened there. Whether it was something mundane that got exaggerated over time or something truly unexplainable, I couldn't say. Thornton admits to having his own unexplained experience near the former Coons property in October 2018. I was marking trail for a guided hike the next day, about half a mile from the restricted area. It was late afternoon, still plenty of light, when I heard what sounded like someone calling my name. Not loudly, more like a whisper that somehow carried through the trees. I called back, thinking it might be another hiker, but no one answered. He describes feeling suddenly cold, like walking into a refrigerated room, despite the mild autumn temperature. Then I noticed the silence. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of leaves rustling, though I could see the trees moving in the breeze. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then everything was normal again. I've spent my whole life in these woods, and I've never experienced anything like that before or since. Science suggests natural explanations. Sinkholes are common in karst topography. Isolation can produce paranoia and delusion. Coincidences, however strange, remain coincidences. Yet questions persist. What did Ezra find in his investigations? What was the phenomenon he discussed with the mysterious RM, who later appeared as Robert Marshfield to claim the property? What were the markings found by Holloway, and what did Reynolds see in the depths of the earth? Geological surveys, conducted in 2019 using advanced imaging techniques, revealed that the area beneath the former Coons property contains an unusually complex network of caves and chambers, according to Dr. Rebecca Winters, whose team conducted the study. While most of these features can be explained by natural karst processes, Winters noted several anomalies. There are structures at approximately 70 feet below the surface that exhibit regularities not typically found in natural cave formations, she explained in her published findings. Perfect circular chambers connected by straight passages at consistent angles. Nature tends to be more irregular. While we're not suggesting artificial construction, these features warrant further investigation. Winters also noted that certain areas showed evidence of recent activity, with passages that appeared to have been open in surveys from the early 2000s now collapsed or filled, while new openings had appeared elsewhere. The subterranean landscape is constantly changing, she observed, but the rate and pattern of change in this particular location is unusual. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the case is its cyclical nature, the repetition of disappearances, always in October, always without resolution. The pattern suggests something deliberate, something patient, something that waits in the shadows of the Ozark forests for specific moments to emerge. Park Service records show that between 1972 and 2020, 7 hikers have been reported missing within 5 miles of the former Coons property. While 5 were eventually found, disoriented but physically unharmed, 2 remain unaccounted for. Both disappearances occurred in October 1987 and 2003, and both involved individuals who had reportedly expressed interest in the Coons legend prior to their hiking trips. In her final notes on the case, written shortly before her death, Martha Burrows wrote, "I no longer believe we are dealing with murder or madness in any conventional sense. Whatever happened at the Coons property transcends ordinary criminal investigation. Some secrets are buried too deep, literally and figuratively, to be uncovered by conventional means, and perhaps some secrets should remain buried." The Buffalo National River draws thousands of visitors each year. They hike its trails, float its waters, and admire the rugged beauty of the Ozarks. Few know they pass near the site of one of Arkansas's most baffling mysteries. Fewer still hear the whispers that sometimes emerge from the deep woods on October nights, whispers that sound almost like words, almost like warnings. Dr. Thomas Blackwood, professor of folklore at the University of Arkansas, has studied the Coons case as part of his research into Ozark legends. What makes this story compelling, he notes, is how it weaves together elements of documented fact. The disappearances, the unusual geological features, the recurring symbols, with the darker threads of folklore that run through these mountains. Blackwood points out that indigenous legends from before European settlement include references to places where the ground breathes and circles where the worlds touch, often associated with disappearances or transformations. These mountains are ancient, he explains. They've been inhabited for thousands of years, and stories accumulate in landscapes like sediment, layer upon layer. What happened to Ezra Coones and the others may have been a modern chapter in a much older narrative. In 2120, during pandemic-related closures of the Buffalo National River, remote sensing equipment placed near the restricted area as part of an environmental monitoring project recorded an unusual phenomenon. During a 2-week period in October, seismographs detected what technicians described as microtremors, vibrations too subtle to be felt by humans, but consistent in pattern and timing, occurring nightly between approximately 2 and 3 a.m. Audio equipment at the same location captured what the monitoring report described as anomalous acoustic phenomena, rhythmic sounds below the threshold of normal human hearing, but clearly distinct from known wildlife or geological sources. When filtered and amplified, these recordings revealed patterns that acoustic analysts found suggestive of communication, with consistent elements repeated in varying sequences. As this account comes to a close, one final detail bears mentioning. Forest Service records show that in October 2017, a routine survey of the restricted area revealed that the fencing had been breached. Inside the perimeter, rangers found hiking equipment, a backpack, water bottle, and flashlight, but no sign of their owner. The equipment was in good condition, apparently recently abandoned. No missing person report was ever filed that matched the incident. The backpack contained a journal with entries describing its owner's fascination with the Coons legend and determination to discover what lies beneath the circles. The final entry, dated October 17th, reads, "Made it past the fence just before sunset. The ground here feels different underfoot, almost like it's vibrating slightly. Found a depression that matches the descriptions, about 20 feet across and perfectly circular. The soil at the center looks disturbed, as if something has been digging from below. Going to set up camera traps before dark and wait. If I'm right, if the pattern holds, something should happen around midnight. The walls between worlds are thinnest now." No name appears in the journal, and efforts to identify its owner through fingerprints or other forensic means were unsuccessful. The camera traps mentioned in the entry were not found with the other equipment. The walls of the Ozarks keep their secrets. The forest reclaims its own. And in Jasper, Arkansas, old-timers still advise against venturing too far north of town when October winds begin to blow, and the veils between worlds grow thin. In the archives of the Newton County Historical Society, among Martha Burroughs's meticulous notes and interviews, lies a single sheet of paper containing what appears to be a transcription of a portion of Ezra Coones's final journal entry, more complete than the often quoted "It's in the walls." The full passage, if authentic, offers a chilling glimpse into Ezra's final hours. "It's in the walls now. I can hear it moving, searching. The symbols Father carved only slow it down. They don't stop it anymore. Perhaps they never truly did. I understand now why Mother wasted away, why Father's heart gave out. It wasn't illness or age. It was the slow drain of whatever it takes from us. The Marshfield letters confirm what I've suspected. It needs our family, our bloodline, to maintain its presence here. Why us, I still don't know. Something in our veins it finds sustaining. Tomorrow I'll set the trap. The clothing on the bed should buy me time to reach the north field and collapse the entrance. If I succeed, let this record stand as warning. If I fail, God help whoever comes after me. The circles are thinning. October calls it forth. Whether these words truly belong to Ezra Coones or represent later embellishment is impossible to determine. But they echo across a century of strange occurrences, disappearances, and whispered warnings, a legacy of mystery that continues to haunt the shadowed hollows of the Ozarks.